Somewhere, right now, someone is standing in front of a mirror, deciding what to put on their body. It feels ordinary, automatic, the kind of decision you make without thinking every single morning of your life. But step back far enough, and it stops looking ordinary at all. Because on this entire planet, among every mammal, every primate, every creature that has ever walked, crawled, or climbed, there is exactly one species that gets dressed. Us. No other animal wakes up and chooses a covering for its skin. No other animal has ever needed to. And yet somewhere in our distant past, a species of primate looked at its own bare body and decided it wasn't finished. Somewhere, tens of thousands of years before cities, before writing, before agriculture, before almost anything we'd recognize as civilization, a single decision was made that no creature on Earth had ever made before, and that decision still echoes in your closet today. Tonight, we're going back to that moment, not to talk about fabric, or fashion, or thread counts, but to ask a much stranger question. What were we actually doing the first time we covered ourselves? And what does the answer tell us about the moment the human mind changed forever? The story we're taught is simple. Early humans got cold, so they wrapped themselves in hide. Survival. Practicality. Case closed. It's a tidy explanation. It's also, almost certainly, wrong, or at least radically incomplete. Here's the problem. Humans evolved in Africa, in warm climates, for hundreds of thousands of years, long before we ever needed protection from snow or frost. Our bodies were already built for heat, not cold. And when early humans did eventually migrate into colder regions, evidence suggests clothing was already part of who we were, not a reaction to the weather, but something we carried with us. If clothing were purely about survival, we'd expect it to appear exactly when the climate demanded it. Bitter cold, sudden freeze, a species scrambling to adapt. That is not what the evidence shows. And there's another problem with the warmth story. Fire had already been tamed by our ancestors long before clothing appears in the record. Shelter existed. Caves existed. If the only goal was staying alive through a cold night, humans already had tools for that. Draping animal hide over bare skin wasn't the obvious next step. It was something else entirely. Something else came first, and to find out what, scientists didn't dig into soil or study ancient bones. They studied lice. It sounds almost absurd that one of the most profound clues about human psychology would come from a parasite. But stay with this, because it's one of the most elegant pieces of detective work in modern science. There are two kinds of lice that live on the human body: head lice, which cling to your hair, and body lice, which live inside clothing, only venturing onto skin to feed. Genetically, these two lice are nearly identical because body lice are a recent evolutionary offshoot of head lice. At some point, a population of head lice adapted to a brand new habitat that hadn't existed before. Fabric. Geneticists realized they could measure the DNA divergence between these two species like a molecular clock. The moment body lice split off and evolved to live in clothing is the moment clothing itself came into existence. And when researchers ran the numbers, the results were staggering. Roughly 170,000 years ago. That's tens of thousands of years before the first evidence of humans facing serious ice age cold, long before we needed insulation to survive. Which means something else was happening in the human mind, something that had nothing to do with temperature at all. So if it wasn't the cold, what was it? This is where the story stops being about biology and starts being about something much stranger: the birth of the human imagination. Anthropologists studying this shift point to a specific cognitive leap the moment our ancestors developed something called theory of mind. The ability to understand that other beings have thoughts, judgments, and perspectives separate from your own. Before this leap, an early human might feel cold and react to it, simple stimulus and response. But after this leap, something new became possible. A human could imagine how another human saw them, could picture themselves through someone else's eyes. Could ask, for the first time in the history of life on Earth, what do they think of me? That single question changed everything. Because once you can imagine being watched, being judged, being remembered, a hide draped over your shoulders is no longer just protection. It becomes a message, a choice, a version of yourself presented to the world on purpose. Think about what that actually requires. It requires holding an image of yourself in your own mind, then imagining that same image sitting inside someone else's head. It requires stepping outside your own perspective entirely, if only for a moment. No other species on this planet has ever been shown to do that with any real complexity, and yet somewhere along our evolutionary path, this ability simply switched on. This wasn't survival, this was the beginning of identity. And once humans could send a message with what covered their bodies, everything about clothing changed. A particular pelt might signal that you were a skilled hunter. A pattern of markings might tell strangers which group you belonged to, long before you spoke a single word to them. Clothing became something almost nothing else in nature has ever achieved, a way to broadcast who you were, what you'd done, and where you belonged, silently, instantly, to anyone who looked at you. In other words, clothing became language, not spoken, not written, worn. It let a stranger from another group know, at a glance, whether you were friend or threat. It let status be seen instead of explained. It let humans plan for a future self, dressing not just for the moment, but for who they intended to be tomorrow, and the version of themselves they wanted others to remember. No other species has ever needed to do this, because no other species has ever had a mind capable of imagining its own reflection in someone else's eyes. And unlike a spoken word, this new language didn't fade the instant it was uttered. It stayed. It traveled with you, into every room you entered, every stranger you passed, every fire you sat beside. For the first time, a human being could walk into a group of people they had never met and be understood before they ever opened their mouth. That is an extraordinary kind of power for a species to stumble into, and once discovered, it never went away. Which brings us back to you, standing in front of your closet on an ordinary morning, feeling a small flicker of doubt about what to wear. Is this too much for the occasion? Is this not enough? Will people think the right thing when they see me? That feeling seems modern, petty even, a byproduct of social media or fashion culture or too many mirrors. But it isn't modern at all. It's ancient. It's the same instinct that once decided whether a hide was thrown over the shoulders of a hunter 170,000 years ago. The anxiety of being seen the wrong way is not shallow. It's one of the oldest, most deeply wired instincts the human mind has ever produced. Every time you get dressed, you are participating in the very first form of human communication that didn't require a single word, a silent, ancient conversation between you and everyone who will ever look at you. We didn't start wearing clothes because we were cold. We started wearing clothes the moment we realized we were being watched, and the moment we understood that we had a choice in how we were seen. That single realization may be one of the oldest fingerprints of the human mind, and you carry it with you every single day without ever noticing it at all. So, the next time you get dressed, take one extra second before you walk out the door. You're not just covering your body, you're continuing a conversation that started before language, before agriculture, before almost everything we consider civilization. If this changed the way you'll look at your closet tomorrow morning, that's exactly the point. Like this video, subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden history of human behavior, and let us know in the comments, what's one thing you wear that says something about who you are?